When this administration talks about making America great again, what's the period of history that they're referring to? This was a question that has never really been directly answered, but we can actually pick out some things based off of things that we have seen from a policy perspective and also from a tax perspective. One of the things that we need to start taking a look at is how Donald Trump is in love with the idea of tariffs as a way to secure the prosperity of the United States. Now, one of the things that we have to understand about tariffs is that it's ultimately the consumer that actually pays those tariffs. And we can't expect Donald Trump to be aware of how tariffs work. And we certainly know that his voters and his base don't know how they work. And he has often referenced a time period during the Gilded Age where tariffs were used to create a protectionist and isolationist economy. And William McKinley was one of the presidents that was a huge fan of tariffs in general. So that gives us a signal. When we think about the Gilded Age, there are three defining characteristics that we need to understand during that period. It was a period of rapid industrialization and all sorts of new technologies entering the landscape. And the Gilded Age in general references a period of time that went from Reconstruction through the early 1910s. And when you think about that time period, you have rapid industrialization and modernization happening. You have unfettered capitalism as a model. This is where all of the wealthy industrialists basically crowded out everybody and gobbled up everything that they could possibly gobble up. This is where you had massive monopolies that concentrated wealth at the elite levels of society while everybody else was living in abject poverty. Some research out there indicates that when you look at the Gilded Age as a time period, you had in the neighborhood of up to 90% of the population in the US living below the poverty line, while the ultra wealthy lived like they had no worries at all because they didn't. So you look at this time period, isolationist policies, high tariffs, protectionist economic policy, huge wealth inequality, massive amounts of the population living below the poverty line, unfettered capitalism, rapid expansion of technology. That time period, from a historical perspective, can be almost a direct parallel to what we're looking at right now. What do we have going on in today's society is very similar to what happened during the Gilded Age. You have a massive wealth disparity. You have new technologies that are gobbling up the landscape, and you have all of the tech bro billionaire crowd bending the knee at the feet of the president in the hopes to be allowed to do what they want to gobble up as many resources as possible. And on the flip side of it, what do you see happening when it comes to everyday working people? All of the supports that the working class needs to survive and make ends meet are being chopped away so that the wealthy can get even a bigger share of the pie. So the parallels are there. And now, when you start looking at some of the tax policies that are being proposed, you're seeing an acceleration to a second era of the Gilded Age coming very quickly to slap us all in the face. Think about what's going through Congress right now. Now, there is a big push to pass a new tax bill, but Republicans in both the House and the Senate know that there is no hope for a standalone tax bill to make it through the House because the House doesn't have the numbers. They're dealing with an extremely thin majority. So, what's the approach that Republicans are taking to get the funding through? They're using a continuing resolution. And in that continuing resolution, you're looking at two key buckets of information that's contained in it. One includes almost 5 trillion in cuts to departments and services that the middle class and working class rely on. And the other includes a raising of the debt limit by $4.5 trillion to facilitate the extension of the Trump tax cuts. Now, keep in mind, the Trump tax cuts in its original form was a $2 trillion giveaway to the ultra wealthy. And it's no surprise that during that period, with that tax cut, post tax cut, you saw the net worths of the world's richest people go through the roof while everybody else was struggling to make ends meet. This is a world where the ultra wealthy continue to get more and 70% of the US working population is living paycheck to paycheck. And they think that's a good model and they want to pass it again. So the debt limited conversation and the continuing resolution conversation all bakes that in. For the working class and the bottom 90%, you're seeing cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, you're seeing cuts to Social Security, you'll see cuts to health services, education, every department you can think of, you're going to see cuts except to the Defense Department. So basically, anything that the working class and the bottom 90% need to bridge the gap that's been created by unfettered capitalism that we're seeing right now is being taken away. And that's going to quickly lead to a scenario where more and more of us are going to be living at or below the poverty line. What do you think the impacts are going to be when the trade war escalates and tariffs start taking effect? What do you think is going to happen to prices when the mass immigration roundups and shipping off to concentration camps impacts our food supply? What do you think is going to happen when exports from Canada get shut down because they're not willing to deal with us as a business partner anymore, especially in the area of energy, because we actually import a lot of energy and oil from Canada? This is setting up to be a complete disaster that is going to benefit the ultra wealthy while we're left holding the bag. If there's one way to describe the continuing resolution and the tax bill and funding bill that's going through Congress right now, it's this. It is another great example of how capitalism is the model that the elites want the working class and the bottom 90% to use while they benefit off of socialism. Think about how much in terms of government subsidies they take advantage of. And that's before you talk about the skewed tax laws that they take advantage of so that they don't have to pay their fair share. That is what's going on right now. From the period of the 1980s to today, you saw a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. What's happening right now, what is being set up by the Republican Party and the Trump administration right now, is going to make that look like peanuts. So when they talk about making America great again, here's what it means. It's going to be great for billionaires, and for everybody else, it's going to be an absolute disaster. This is the time where we need to be thinking about the French Revolution, because they're about to tell us to eat cake.